Hey guys, tonight we slip through the cool, winding corridors of a palace long gone. The walls are heavy with the weight of history, so thick you almost expect them to whisper their secrets if you listen hard enough. You feel the air shift around you a little denser as if it's holding its breath, waiting for you to uncover something hidden. You step lightly, half expecting the weight of thousands of years to press against your shoulders, but here, in the shadow of Persia's most powerful rulers, everything remains so quietly poised. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with where you're tuning in from. I'd love to know just how far this little midnight caravan travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in ancient Persia now, walking the quiet halls of a palace where politics are made in whispers. This isn't a place of grand speeches or booming decrees. No, this palace thrives in silence. The air is thick with incense, a little smoke curling its way through the marble columns, while 1,000 hidden intrigues fester in the shadows. Here, power isn't shouted. It's carefully plotted, drawn in secret rooms where few can enter and even fewer leave unscathed. You feel the pulse of that hidden power surrounding you as you move deeper into the labyrinth of corridors. It's not the warlord or the king who controls Persia, you realize. It's the quiet, unseen forces, the ministers who whisper into the ear of the sultan, the generals who maneuver their chess pieces in the shadows. The real game of power is far more subtle than you imagined. The sultan's decision, while important, isn't the only one that matters. It's the ones that happen behind closed doors, in rooms bathed in the glow of oil lamps, where alliances are forged and enemies are quietly undone. It's here, in these darkened chambers, that the fate of the empire truly rests. As you step through a narrow archway, you find yourself in a room that's strangely familiar. It feels like you've been here before, even though this is your first time. The walls are adorned with rich tapestries, the colors so vivid they almost seem to move in the flickering candlelight. The scent of rose petals and spices fills the air, perhaps remnants of a feast long past, or maybe the lingering essence of decisions made in haste. The floor is cool underfoot, each step echoing softly in the stillness. You're standing at the crossroads of history, where the empire's fate was decided, one whispered word at a time. The Sultan, a figure of almost mythical presence, is known to be a man of great ambition. But it's not his loud commands or visible actions that hold Persia together. It's his ability to surround himself with the right people, to listen to the right voices. In the court, there's no shortage of those who would seek to influence him. And yet, those who make their way into his inner circle, who find their seats at the table of power, have all learned one simple truth. In Persia, silence is the loudest voice. You can almost hear the low murmur of conversations, each one filled with meaning. A soft cough behind a curtain, a faint rustle of silk as someone shifts just out of view. These are the moments, the fleeting glances, the quiet exchanges that define power in this place. The Sultan may be the face of the empire, but it's the ministers, the generals, and the unseen figures who move behind the curtains who truly shape the destiny of Persia. Now, in this room, you're not just an observer. You're a part of the silence, moving through the intricacies of power. The air around you is thick with secrets, and you can't help but wonder how many others have walked this same path, tracing the same steps, feeling the same weight of history pressing down upon them. These halls were not just the backdrop of empire, they were the beating heart of it. You feel a sudden breeze pass through, carrying with it the faintest hint of something far away, perhaps the distant waters of the Tigris, or maybe the winds from the farthest reaches of Persia's borders. It doesn't matter. You're here, in this moment, in this secret world, where whispers are as powerful as swords and alliances as dangerous as the most skilled assassin. As you move further into the palace, you realize this is only the beginning. There's more to uncover, more layers to peel back. Each turn of the corridor, each new door that opens, leads to another chapter in the endless game of power that has shaped the Persian Empire for centuries. Tonight, you won't just be learning about history. You'll be stepping into it, feeling the weight of each decision, each move, each quiet plot that has kept Persia on the throne for so long. You pause, standing in the shadows, just out of sight, as a figure enters the room. A figure who, though barely visible, carries the weight of empire on their shoulders. It's not the Sultan, but someone just as important, just as influential, moving through the palace unnoticed. A smile tugs at the corner of your lips, for you know that it's these hidden figures who have shaped the course of history, making their moves in the shadows while the world above remains blissfully unaware. As you follow this figure through the winding halls, you can't help but feel the pull of the mystery around you. There are many more stories to be told here, many more secrets to uncover, and as the night deepens, you realize that you've only just begun to scratch the surface of Persia's hidden world of power and intrigue. The passageway narrows as you step deeper into the heart of the palace. The flickering light from the oil lamps dances along the stone walls, casting shifting shadows that seem to whisper in their own secret language. As you move through the halls, you can't help but feel that you're no longer just walking through a building. You're walking through the very framework of an empire. The walls are thick with history, and every corner seems to echo with the weight of decisions made long ago. In the distance, you hear the faint murmur of voices, low and urgent, like distant thunder rolling across the desert. These are the voices of the satraps, the provincial governors who ruled the vast lands of Persia with the Sultan's blessing, yet were often far more powerful than they seemed. They were the eyes and ears of the empire, controlling everything from taxation to military strategy, and their word was law in their territories. But as you know, power is never quite as straightforward as it appears. Behind the polished exterior of these provincial rulers, there were always rivalries, backstabbing, and even the occasional outright rebellion. The satraps were the true stewards of Persia's far-flung regions, but they were also often the most ambitious players in the game of politics. They knew that their power was not secured by loyalty alone. It was secured by the loyalty of their own subjects, the loyalty of their armies, and perhaps most importantly, by their ability to influence the Sultan's decisions from a distance. In some cases, it was said that satraps could change the course of Persian history with a single letter, one letter filled with whispered secrets, promises, and veiled threats. As you pass through the corridors, the air becomes heavier, as if the weight of these secret alliances and rivalries is pressing in on you. You pause before a large wooden door, its frame intricately carved with symbols of power and protection, symbols that speak to the strength of the satraps who once held sway in these halls. The door creaks open slowly, as if the building itself is reluctant to let you pass into this part of the palace's history. Inside, the room is dimly lit, and the atmosphere feels thick with the tension of 1,000 whispered deals. This is where the satraps would have met in secret, where they would have plotted their moves, either to curry favor with the Sultan or to solidify their own power. The room feels alive with the presence of these men and women, their voices low but insistent, each one trying to outmaneuver the others for just a little more influence, a little more power. You step further into the room, the cool stone floor beneath your feet offering no sound as you walk. A long, low table stretches out before you, its surface worn smooth by the passage of time and countless hands. On it, scattered across the surface, are maps, detailed depictions of Persia's borders, the rivers, the mountains, the roads that led to far-flung lands. You run your fingers over one of the maps, feeling the raised edges of the ink and the careful strokes that have marked the boundaries of empire. You can almost hear the conversations that would have taken place here. Conversations about troop movements, about trade routes, about the shifting balance of power between Persia and its neighbors. And yet, despite the significance of these discussions, you know that they were never made in the open. They were hidden away, tucked in corners like this one, whispered between the satraps who knew that their ability to maintain power depended on how well they navigated the treacherous waters of politics. At the far end of the room, a large tapestry hangs on the wall, depicting the ancient gods of Persia, gods who once ruled over all, their eyes ever watchful, their power absolute. The gods are no longer present in the day-to-day politics of the empire, but their influence lingers in the air, in the way decisions are made, and in the way power is distributed. It's as if the very walls of the palace have have absorbed the essence of these gods, their whispers still echoing through the halls. And as you stand there contemplating the rise and fall of these great figures, you realize just how fragile power truly is. The satraps, despite their control over vast territories, were always just a step away from being overthrown. A single letter, a single alliance, or a single betrayal could undo everything they had worked for. Theirs was a game of constant tension, of never truly knowing whether you were in control or if the rug would be pulled out from under you at any moment. You feel a chill pass over you as you continue your exploration of this hidden corner of the palace. The voices of the satraps, long gone, still seem to echo in the air. Their secrets, their machinations, their quiet manipulations. They've all left their mark on this place. And though you may never fully understand the depths of their power, you can't help but feel the weight of their ambition as you move deeper into the heart of Persia's hidden politics. As you leave the room, you can't shake the feeling that you've uncovered just a small fraction of the vast network of alliances and rivalries that defined the Persian Empire. You step back into the corridor, the sound of your footsteps now louder than ever, as if the walls themselves are urging you to keep moving, to keep uncovering the secrets that lie hidden just beyond your reach. You find yourself moving through another set of corridors, this time quieter, as if the walls themselves are listening. The air is thick with the smell of old wood and the faintest trace of incense, probably from the chambers you passed earlier. The sound of your footsteps echoes slightly in the stillness, but it feels different here. This isn't the hustle and bustle of the throne room or the tension of secretive meetings. This is a quieter place, one that hums with a different kind of power, subtle, invisible, and absolute. You step into a dimly lit room. It's smaller than the grand chambers you've seen before, but it feels no less important. The walls are lined with dark wood and tapestries, the fabric rich and heavy with the weight of history. In the center of the room, there's a low table covered with papers, documents that have probably never seen the light of day, filled with information too important, too secret to be revealed to the public. This is the kind of room where decisions are made before they ever reach the Sultan's ear. Here, in this space, it wasn't the Sultan who had the ultimate power. It was those closest to him, the royal guards, the eunuchs, and the trusted advisors who whispered in his ear. You could feel their presence in every corner, the unspoken weight of their influence. These men and women were the ones who kept the empire's secrets, who controlled what the Sultan saw and heard. They were the ones who decided what information made its way to the throne and what was kept hidden in the shadows. The royal guard, more than just a group of armed men, served as the Sultan's most trusted agents. They were the ones who had access to the most intimate aspects of the Sultan's life. But it wasn't just about protecting the Sultan's body. No, the true power of the royal guard lay in their ability to control information. They were the gatekeepers of the throne room, the keepers of the royal ear. They controlled the flow of news, the whispers that reached the Sultan's ears, shaping the very decisions that would determine the fate of empires. You pause and imagine the conversations that must have taken place in this very room. The soft murmur of a royal advisor, carefully crafting the right words to guide the Sultan's hand. The faintest shuffle of feet as a guard moved closer, ready to intercept a message before it could reach the wrong person. The way the royal guard worked was like a dance, every movement measured, every word weighed carefully. One wrong step, one careless whisper, and the consequences could be disastrous. In the corner of the room, you notice a small wooden chest. It's locked, of course, but there's something about the way it's placed that catches your attention. This is where the most important secrets were kept. Information so vital, so dangerous, that it had to be protected at all costs. It's easy to imagine the royal guards, their hands steady as they passed these secrets from one trusted soul to another. The weight of these secrets, the power they held, was something that could never be underestimated. As you move further into the room, you see the faint outline of a shadow flicker on the far wall, just barely visible in the dim light. The shadow of someone passing by the door, one of the guards, perhaps, or another trusted figure. You can almost hear the soft scrape of sandals against the stone floor as they walk by, their presence barely detectable, yet impossible to ignore. It's the kind of quiet power that is everywhere, yet never truly seen. You step back into the corridor, feeling the weight of the silence around you. The air is thick with the sense that there's more going on here than meets the eye. It's not just the Sultan's decisions that matter. It's the ones made in rooms like this by people whose names you'll never know. The real game of power is always played in the shadows, where the whispers are the loudest and the stakes are the highest. As you walk down the corridor, you think back to the moments you just witnessed, the quiet tension, the hidden power. There's something almost seductive about the way it works. The royal guard, the eunuchs, the trusted advisors, all of them pulling the strings, making decisions that change the course of history. They may have been out of sight, but their influence was felt in every corner of the empire. The Sultan may have been the face of Persia, but the true power lay in the quiet shadows, where the royal guard stood watch, ever vigilant, ever silent. And as you continue your journey through the palace, you can't help but wonder, how many more rooms, how many more corners, hold secrets that are just waiting to be uncovered? The passageway narrows as you step deeper into the heart of the palace. The flickering light from the oil lamps dances along the stone walls, casting shifting shadows that seem to whisper in their own secret language. As you move through the halls, you can't help but feel that you're no longer just walking through a building. You're walking through the very framework of an empire. The walls are thick with history, and every corner seems to echo with the weight of decisions made long ago. In the distance, you hear the faint murmur of voices, low and urgent, like distant thunder rolling across the desert. These are the voices of the satraps, the provincial governors who ruled the vast lands of Persia with the Sultan's blessing, yet were often far more powerful than they seemed. They were the eyes and ears of the empire, controlling everything from taxation to military strategy, and their word was law in their territories. But as you know, power is never quite as straightforward as it appears. Behind the polished exterior of these provincial rulers, there were always rivalries, backstabbing, and even the occasional outright rebellion. The satraps were the true stewards of Persia's far-flung regions, but they were also often the most ambitious players in the game of politics. They knew that their power was not secured by loyalty alone. It was secured by the loyalty of their own subjects, the loyalty of their armies, and perhaps most importantly, by their ability to influence the Sultan's decisions from a distance. In some cases, it was said that satraps could change the course of Persian history with a single letter, one letter filled with whispered secrets, promises, and veiled threats. As you pass through the corridors, the air becomes heavier, as if the weight of these secret alliances and rivalries is pressing in on you. You pause before a large wooden door, its frame intricately carved with symbols of power and protection, symbols that speak to the strength of the satraps who once held sway in these halls. The door creaks open slowly, as if the building itself is reluctant to let you pass into this part of the palace's history. Inside, the room is dimly lit, and the atmosphere feels thick with the tension of 1,000 whispered deals. This is where the satraps would have met in secret, where they would have plotted their moves, either to curry favor with the Sultan or to solidify their own power. The room feels alive with the presence of these men and women, their voices low but insistent, each one trying to outmaneuver the others for just a little more influence, a little more power. You step further into the room, the cool stone floor beneath your feet offering no sound as you walk. A long, low table stretches out before you, its surface worn smooth by the passage of time and countless hands. On it, scattered across the surface, are maps, detailed depictions of Persia's borders, the rivers, the mountains, the roads that led to far-flung lands. You run your fingers over one of the maps, feeling the raised edges of the ink and the careful strokes that have marked the boundaries of empire. You can almost hear the conversations that would have taken place here. Conversations about troop movements, about trade routes, about the shifting balance of power between Persia and its neighbors. And yet, despite the significance of these discussions, you know that they were never made in the open. They were hidden away, tucked in corners like this one, whispered between the satraps who knew that their ability to maintain power depended on how well they navigated the treacherous waters of politics. At the far end of the room, a large tapestry hangs on the wall, depicting the ancient gods of Persia, gods who once ruled over all, their eyes ever watchful, their power absolute. The gods are no longer present in the day-to-day politics of the empire, but their influence lingers in the air, in the way decisions are made, in the way power is distributed. It's as if the very walls of the palace have absorbed the essence of these gods, their whispers still echoing through the halls. And as you stand there contemplating the rise and fall of these great figures, you realize just how fragile power truly is. The satraps, despite their control over vast territories, were always just a step away from being overthrown. A single letter, a single alliance, or a single betrayal could undo everything they had worked for. Theirs was a game of constant tension, of never truly knowing whether you were in control or if the rug would be pulled out from under you at any moment. You feel a chill pass over you as you continue your exploration of this hidden corner of the palace. The voices of the satraps, long gone, still seem to echo in the air. Their secrets, their machinations, their quiet manipulations. They've all left their mark on this place. And though you may never fully understand the depths of their power, you can't help but feel the weight of their ambition as you move deeper into the heart of Persia's hidden politics. As you leave the room, you can't shake the feeling that you've uncovered just a small fraction of the vast network of alliances and rivalries that defined the Persian Empire. You step back into the corridor, the sound of your footsteps now louder than ever, as if the walls themselves are urging you to keep moving, to keep uncovering the secrets that lie hidden just beyond your reach. Certainly, here is the text as you requested. You step further into the heart of the palace, the cool stone underfoot now feeling like a path leading to the crossroads of empires. Ahead, the faintest sound of wind can be heard, perhaps the breeze from the distant mountains or the shifting air from the far reaches of the empire. The walls around you begin to change, no longer adorned solely with the opulent Persian-style patterns, but now blending with influences from the Greek world, a sign of the cultural and political mingling that was about to come. As you wander through the grand hallway, you catch sight of a mosaic, a scene depicting warriors locked in battle, their faces fierce yet resolute. These were not just warriors of Persia, but of a different time, a different place. Greek soldiers with their shielded helmets and battle-drawn swords. The Persians and Greeks, once at war, now seem to exist side by side, their fates intertwined in ways few could predict. Their history, a tangled web of conflict and cooperation, echoes down the centuries, and you stand at the point where these two ancient worlds collided. A distant memory resurfaces as you continue your journey. The mighty Persian Empire, once thought to be unstoppable, facing the Greeks in what would come to be known as the Persian Wars. The famous battles, Marathon, Thermopylae, Salamis, where Persian forces under Darius and later Xerxes clashed with the Greek city-states, often outnumbered and outmatched. But these wars were not simply about power. They were about ideas, culture, and the way each side viewed the world. For Persia, it was about expanding the reach of an empire, securing resources, and maintaining control over vast territories. For Greece, it was about freedom, identity, and the desire to preserve their unique culture from foreign domination. You pause in front of a large, intricately carved relief, the figures of Persian and Greek warriors locked in eternal struggle, their expressions frozen in time. The relief depicts not just a battle, but an ideology. Persia, with its centralizing vision of rule, versus Greece, with its decentralized, free-thinking city-states. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. One empire united under one ruler, the other a collection of fiercely independent peoples, each with their own gods, their own values, their own ways of life. This clash of civilizations, while violent, was also deeply philosophical. It raised questions of governance, of rights, of what it meant to be free or to be ruled. But as you move deeper into this hall, the mood shifts. The fighting, the bloodshed, and the turmoil of war fade into the background, replaced by something else entirely, the art of diplomacy. The Persian kings, you realize, were not just great conquerors, they were also master diplomats. Their empire was vast, stretching from the Indus River in the east to the Aegean Sea in the west, and they knew that maintaining such a vast domain required more than just military might. It required alliances, understanding, and the ability to negotiate with even their bitterest enemies. In a small alcove, you find a delicate set of scrolls, the edges faded with age. These scrolls are the records of Persian ambassadors, documents detailing treaties and agreements with the Greeks. You run your fingers over the smooth parchment, feeling the faint imprint of words that have survived the ravages of time. These treaties, often overlooked by historians, were the silent victories of the Persian court. While the battles on the field were decisive, it was the agreements made behind closed doors that often shaped the course of history. The art of diplomacy, the delicate negotiations that took place in rooms like this one, were just as important as the sword. The Persian kings, particularly Darius I and Xerxes, were brilliant in their ability to use diplomacy as a tool for empire building. They knew that war, while inevitable, could only go so far. To truly control an empire, to secure its future, they needed to make alliances, secure trade routes, and ensure that their influence stretched beyond the battlefield. In their interactions with the Greeks, these kings understood that the relationship was not simply about domination, it was about balance. Persia had to secure its place on the world stage, and this often meant compromising with the Greeks, even if it was done behind closed doors. You step back and look at the relief once more, taking in the full scope of what it represents. The warriors, frozen in time, their hands poised to strike, now seem less like enemies and more like two sides of the same coin, two civilizations, forever linked in the struggle for power, control, and influence. The battles they fought were brutal, but they were also formative, shaping the future of the ancient world in ways that resonate even today. As you leave the alcove and continue your journey through the palace, you feel the weight of history pressing in around you. The Persian Empire, with all its might and grandeur, was a product not just of military conquest, but of diplomacy, of alliances, and of the delicate balance of power. The Greeks, though vastly different in their ways of life, had been both rivals and partners, and the relationship between these two great empires was as complex and layered as the walls of this very palace. You can almost hear the soft murmurs of the Persian diplomats, speaking in quiet tones, making their calculated moves. Their words, though soft and measured, carry the power to change the course of history. And as you leave this part of the palace, the feeling lingers. History is never just about battles and conquests. It's about the alliances made, the deals struck, and the quiet negotiations that, in the end, shape the fate of nations. As you move further into the depths of the palace, the corridors begin to grow darker, the walls thickening with the weight of secrets and scheming that have been hidden for centuries. The air is cooler here, almost as if the stones themselves are holding their breath, waiting for you to discover what has long been concealed. You pause for a moment, feeling the shift in the atmosphere, as if the very fabric of the empire is about to reveal its most guarded truths. To your left, there's a narrow passage that leads to a room with an odd sense of quiet authority. The room is small, but you immediately sense that it is important. This is where the real work of the empire was done, away from the pomp and ceremony of the Sultan's court. This is where the true architects of the Persian Empire, the ones who shaped the policies, the decisions, and the future of the empire, carried out their work. But these architects were not the generals or the ministers you'd find in the public eye. No, these were the men and women who worked in the shadows, advisors, strategists, bureaucrats, and diplomats, whose influence extended far beyond their titles. The first thing you notice when you step into the room is the table. It's large, made of dark wood, worn smooth by years of use, and covered with maps, scrolls, and carefully organized stacks of documents. This is where the fate of entire provinces was decided, where strategies were born, and where the silent negotiations that governed the Persian Empire took place. The documents before you contain far more than the logistics of empire building. They contain the whispers of men and women who knew how to control the ebb and flow of power, who understood the subtle art of shaping the future without ever stepping into the limelight. You lean in closer to one of the scrolls, your fingers brushing against the delicate parchment. The writing is small and precise, each word a carefully chosen instrument in the great game of politics. The names of distant satraps, military commanders, and distant allies are listed, along with carefully outlined instructions, some political, others military. These are the decisions that would never be announced to the public, the moves made behind the curtain, far away from the eyes of the Sultan or his court. It's here that the empire was truly molded, in the small, quiet moments between the lines of ink. It's easy to imagine the advisors gathered around this very table, their voices low as they discuss the fate of entire regions, their words laden with the weight of their empire's future. These were the people who truly ran the Persian Empire. They may not have worn the crown, but they held the power to shape history. Their decisions would determine the rise and fall of cities, the outcomes of wars, and the alliances that would shape the course of the empire for generations to come. They were the unseen architects, the quiet minds that worked behind the throne, pulling the strings and ensuring the empire's dominance. As you move deeper into the room, you notice a large map hanging on the wall. It's old, the edges frayed and the colors faded, but it's still a remarkable sight. The map details the vast territories of the Persian Empire, stretching from the Indus River in the east to the Aegean Sea in the west. The sheer scale of the empire is overwhelming, and as you study the map, you realize just how intricate the web of power really was. Every province, every city, every road was not just a geographical location, it was a potential source of power, a chess piece in the game of empire building. You find yourself staring at the map for a moment longer than you intended, contemplating the vastness of it all. The Persian Empire wasn't just a collection of territories. It was a delicate system of control, of diplomacy, of carefully balanced alliances. The empire was only as strong as its ability to maintain that balance. And it was the unseen architects, those who worked quietly behind the scenes, that ensured the empire remained stable, even as the world around it shifted. But power is never secure, and even the most carefully laid plans can be undone in an instant. You begin to wonder how many of these architects, these quiet masterminds, were ever aware of the precariousness of the empire they built. Did they understand that their carefully constructed webs of influence and control were always at risk of unraveling? Did they know that in the blink of an eye, the decisions they made here, in rooms like this one, could lead to the empire's downfall? As you step away from the map, you feel the weight of their legacy pressing in on you. These architects of power may have been invisible to the outside world, but their influence was felt in every corner of the Persian Empire. Without them, without their careful guidance and hidden strategies, the empire would never have flourished as it did. They were the quiet architects, the unsung heroes of the empire, whose names will never be remembered, but whose actions shaped the very course of history. And as you leave this room, stepping back into the hallway, you can't help but feel that the empire's true power was never in its rulers. It was in those who worked behind the scenes, quietly pulling the strings, always watching, always waiting. The architects of empire may not have been seen, but their power was absolute. The corridor stretches out before you, the soft light of the lanterns flickering on the walls, leading you deeper into the heart of the palace. You continue on, the weight of what you've just learned heavy in your mind. The Persian Empire was not just a tale of kings and queens. It was a tale of the quiet masterminds who built it, who kept it alive, and who ensured that it would endure long after the sultans had passed into history. You move further through the palace, following a narrow path that seems almost hidden, as if it were intentionally secluded from the bustling heart of the court. The walls here are different, covered with intricate carvings of lions, birds, and fire, symbols that seem to pulse with ancient energy. The faint scent of incense fills the air, carrying the delicate notes of sandalwood and frankincense. It's an atmosphere that feels sacred, reverent even, like the walls themselves are protecting something much older than the Persian Empire. You pause in front of a grand chamber where the temperature shifts noticeably as you cross the threshold. The room is illuminated by the flickering light of a sacred fire, the symbol of Zoroastrianism, the ancient faith that has woven itself into the very fabric of Persian life for centuries. The fire, burning bright and steady, represents the eternal light, a symbol of purity, and truth, and you can feel its presence before you even lay eyes on it. This is the heart of Persian spiritual power, where the flames of faith have burned since the reign of the mighty Achaemenid kings. Zoroastrianism, unlike the more widely known religions of the time, was a belief system centered on duality, the constant battle between good and evil, light and darkness, truth and lies. It taught that life was a constant struggle to uphold truth and order in a chaotic world, and that the righteous would be rewarded with eternal life. It wasn't just a religion, it was the foundation of Persian society, its principles governing everything from law to social hierarchy. As you approach the fire, you notice the smooth, polished stone that surrounds the altar. The flames dance, crackling softly, and you realize that this fire has been tended to by generations of priests who have kept it burning as a symbol of divine presence. You can almost feel the weight of the centuries upon you, the lineage of guardians who have come before you. They say that Zoroastrian priests could read the flames, interpreting their movements as omens or messages from the gods. The slightest change in the fire's flicker was enough to send the court into a frenzy of speculation. In the days of the Achaemenid Empire, when Darius and Xerxes ruled, Zoroastrianism was more than just a faith. It was a political tool, too. The sultans were not merely rulers, they were divine figures, chosen by the gods to maintain order and uphold truth. The idea of divine kingship was rooted in Zoroastrian principles, and the sultan's connection to Ahura Mazda, the supreme god of Zoroastrianism, was a cornerstone of their power. You can imagine the ancient rituals that took place in this very room, priests chanting sacred hymns as they tended the fire, their voices rising in unison, calling on the gods to bless the empire. The kings, too, would have been here, bowing before the flames, offering sacrifices to ensure their reign was prosperous and their decisions were guided by divine wisdom. The fire, with its constant, unwavering light, was a reminder that no matter how dark the world may seem, there is always the potential for renewal and righteousness. As you watch the fire flicker, a sense of quiet reverence washes over you. The faith of Zoroastrianism has endured long after the fall of the Persian Empire, its symbols still woven into the culture of Iran today. The ancient belief in light, in truth, in the battle between good and evil, continues to shape the hearts and minds of those who remember the mighty empire that once spanned much of the ancient world. The priests, you realize, were not just spiritual guides. They were political advisors, too. Their counsel was sought after in the most critical of moments. A sultan might visit them in secret, seeking guidance before embarking on a campaign or making a decision that could change the fate of the empire. These were not just questions of faith, they were questions of power, of destiny, and of the empire's survival. You can almost hear the whispers of those long-dead rulers, the weight of their decisions carried by the smoke from this very fire. Did they truly believe in the power of the gods to guide them? Or was it simply a tool to legitimize their rule? Was it faith? Or was it just another part of the game of politics that ran through the veins of the Persian Empire? The fire crackles in front of you, as steady and eternal as the empire once was. But you can't help but wonder how much of the belief in the divine right of kings was genuine, and how much of it was a carefully constructed narrative designed to keep the people in line. The sultans, like many rulers, were divinely appointed, but was it their connection to the gods that made them powerful, or the carefully crafted illusion of divine favor? As you stand there, lost in thought, the room seems to grow even quieter, the flame's soft crackle filling the silence. It's as though the fire itself is waiting for you to understand, waiting for you to see the empire for what it was, a place of complex beliefs, profound power, and hidden motivations. The truth was never fully revealed to the people, just as the flames of the sacred fire never fully show their secrets. You turn to leave, the soft glow of the fire fading behind you, but the sense of something ancient, something eternal, lingers in the air. And as you walk away, you feel the weight of the empire's spiritual power pressing on you. The Persians were not just conquerors, they were philosophers, mystics, and believers, intertwining religion and politics in a way that shaped the course of history. Their empire may have fallen, but the sacred fire, the light of truth, still burns brightly in the hearts of those who remember. You continue through the winding corridors, the palace expanding in its complexity as though the very walls are designed to keep secrets. There's a quiet hum in the air, a sense of something hidden just beyond your reach, like a whisper too soft to catch. As you pass through these hallways, you can almost hear the faint shuffle of feet, the subtle rustle of silk as the Persian elite maneuvered their way through this labyrinth of politics and intrigue. This is the heart of the empire, not the grand hallways where the Sultan holds court, but the hidden spaces where the true players of the Persian world come and go, weaving their webs of power and influence. The Persian elite, noble families, high-ranking generals, and skilled diplomats did not make their moves in the open. They operated in the shadows, moving with the elegance and precision of skilled chess players. Their power was not displayed in public, but was instead exercised in whispered conversations, subtle nods, and carefully crafted alliances. You step into a small room, dimly lit by the glow of a lantern. The floor beneath you is covered with soft Persian carpets, their colors rich with history, their intricate designs telling tales of battles won and lost, of alliances forged and broken. At the center of the room is a low table, its surface cluttered with scrolls, letters, and diplomatic documents. You lean closer, your eyes tracing the elegant script on one of the papers. It's a letter from a powerful noble, perhaps even one of the satraps, to a distant ally. The contents of the letter are barely visible, but the tone is unmistakable, calculated, precise, and laced with subtle threats. This is how power was wielded in the Persian Empire, not with the flash of a sword, but with the quiet manipulation of words and promises. The Persian elite didn't just rely on military might. They understood the power of information, the value of a well-placed whisper, the weight of a promise made in the dark. Rivals, both internal and external, were not confronted openly. Instead, they were handled with finesse, through the careful play of alliances, the strategic exchange of favors, and the manipulation of each person's desires and weaknesses. A well-timed gesture, a carefully chosen word, could turn the tide of an empire. As you walk through the room, your fingers grazing the edge of the scrolls, you begin to realize the intricate dance that took place in this very space. The Persian elite, with their rivalries and grudges, weren't merely competing for titles or wealth. No, they were playing a much deeper game, one that involved loyalty, ambition, and the careful management of power. Each move, each alliance, each act of diplomacy was part of a larger, carefully orchestrated plan that could determine the fate of the empire. In one corner of the room, you notice a series of portraits, painted in rich colors and set in ornate frames. These are the faces of the Persian elite, men and women whose names may have faded from history, but whose influence shaped the empire's destiny. Some of the faces look stern, their eyes sharp and calculating, while others are softer, their expressions filled with a quiet wisdom. They were the ones who kept the empire running, the ones who made the decisions that allowed Persia to thrive. And yet they were the ones who remained in the shadows, working behind the scenes, shaping history without ever being truly seen. You can almost hear the murmur of their voices, the whispers of conspiracies, the rustling of papers filled with deals and promises. These were not the loud voices of generals on the battlefield or the proclamations of kings in the throne room. No, these were the quiet voices of men and women who knew that true power was not in the public eye, but in the ability to control the flow of information, to manage relationships, and to know when to strike and when to wait. As you step back into the hallway, you feel a sense of awe at the complexity of it all. The Persian elite were not just wealthy or influential, they were masters of the game of power. They understood that loyalty could be bought and sold, that alliances could be forged and broken in the blink of an eye. They played their roles in the grand chessboard of the empire, moving in the shadows, carefully calculating their next move. And as you leave the room, the weight of their power lingers, like an invisible presence, watching over you as you walk through the palace. The empire may have fallen, but the lessons of the Persian elite, their ability to manipulate and control, continue to echo through the corridors of history. Even in the silence, their power, you step into another corridor, this one narrower and winding, as though it were designed not just to confuse, but to conceal. The air here is different, carrying the faint scent of spices, cinnamon, cloves, and something you can't quite place. It's as if you've crossed from one world into another, from the world of palace intrigues into the very veins of the empire. You can almost feel the pulse of trade routes beneath your feet, stretching far beyond the walls of this ancient palace, reaching across deserts, mountains, and seas. Persia, with its vast empire, was not only a political and military powerhouse, it was also a hub of commerce where goods from every corner of the ancient world passed through its borders. The Silk Road, the ancient highway that connected the east to the west, ran through Persia like a lifeline, its influence felt in every city and every trade route. But these weren't just routes for silk and spices. They were also the pathways of secrets, of information, of quiet negotiations that shaped the very course of history. You pause at a large map hanging on the wall, detailing the major trade routes that ran through the empire. The map is ancient, its edges frayed, but the information it holds is invaluable. You can trace the paths that goods like incense, jade, and precious metals took as they made their way from the far reaches of the east to the bustling markets of Constantinople to the grand palaces of Egypt and beyond. But what is more fascinating than the goods themselves are the messages they carried. Whispers of politics, of wars and alliances, of secret treaties forged in the back rooms of merchant stalls and hidden corners of busy marketplaces. You lean closer, your fingers brushing against the inked lines of the map. The trade routes were not just for commodities. They were also highways for spies and diplomats who moved between the empires like shadows, exchanging not just goods, but secrets that could alter the course of empires. Information flowed just as freely as silk and spice. Persian merchants, often more than just traders, were the silent witnesses to the dealings of the great powers. They were the ones who passed on information, whether through subtle hints, letters hidden in the folds of their goods, or whispered conversations in the back rooms of inns and marketplaces. As you continue down the hall, you come upon a small alcove where traders once met in secrecy. The space is humble, almost hidden, but it feels alive with the echoes of deals made long ago. The walls are lined with shelves, filled with what seems like simple everyday items, pottery, textiles, and beads. But it's the small, seemingly insignificant items that catch your eye. An old, worn scroll, a coin with the insignia of a distant kingdom, a bundle of herbs tied in a simple cloth. These items, once traded in the shadows of Persia's bustling markets, held the power to change the course of history. Behind each exchange, behind each item passed from one hand to another, were stories of alliances, betrayals, and quiet decisions that shaped the future of the empire. You can almost hear the soft murmur of merchants' voices, their accents blending together as they discuss not just trade, but politics. The merchants knew far more than they let on, because they were everywhere, and they had ears in every corner of the empire. They knew when armies were gathering on the borders, when alliances were being forged in secret, and when an emperor's reign was in jeopardy. These men and women were the true architects of the empire's stability, for without them, the flow of goods and of information would grind to a halt. They were the lifeblood of the empire, and their networks of trade and intelligence kept the empire's rulers in power. As you look around the room, a sense of awe settles over you. The Persian Empire, for all its grandeur, was built not just on the backs of warriors or the might of kings. It was built on the quiet, steady flow of trade and information. The merchants, the diplomats, and the spies, they were the ones who kept the empire running. They moved like shadows between the great courts, never seen but always felt, always shaping the course of history with a well-timed word or a carefully chosen gift. You take one last look at the map, tracing the lines that once connected Persia to the rest of the world, and then turn to leave the alcove. The weight of what you've just uncovered presses down on you. The knowledge that the true power of the empire lay not just in its military might, but in its ability to control the flow of information, to make alliances and shape the future in the quietest of ways. As you step back into the corridor, the weight of history seems to press in on you, the air thick with the secrets of the past. The Persian Empire may have faded, but its legacy, its ability to connect and control the world through trade and diplomacy still resonates today. The merchants of Persia, the spies, and the diplomats may be long gone, but their influence continues to echo through the corridors of time. You move deeper into the palace, the corridors now growing colder and the atmosphere more secretive. The grand halls you once wandered through are far behind you, replaced by smaller, narrower passageways where the light flickers just a little less brightly. The deeper you go, the quieter it becomes, and the walls seem to draw closer together, almost as if they are hiding something from you. You reach a small, unassuming door. It's wood, dark and weathered. It doesn't seem important at first, but you can sense that this is no ordinary door. It leads to the unseen heart of the Empire's covert operations. Behind it lies a network of spies and informants who have watched over Persia's secrets for centuries. The Persian spies, often forgotten by history, were the silent sentinels of the Empire, the ones who ensured its security from within and without. They operated in the shadows, their identities veiled and their actions rarely recorded. But their influence was immense, as their quiet whispers delivered in secret shaped the Empire's fate more than any public decision ever could. As you step into the room, the cold air bites at your skin. It's dimly lit, a single candle flickering on a low wooden table, casting long shadows that stretch across the floor. You can almost hear the faint scratching of quills on paper, the rustle of hidden scrolls, the quiet footfalls of those who once used this very space to communicate in the most delicate of ways. This was the heart of espionage in Persia, where reports were smuggled, secrets traded, and alliances formed in whispers. On the table, a series of maps and coded letters are spread out in front of you, their contents written in cryptic symbols and complex ciphers that only the most trained eyes could decipher. These were the communications of Persia's spies, the messengers who gathered information not through open war, but through subtlety, cleverness, and the art of deceit. They were the ones who infiltrated enemy lines, who mingled with foreign diplomats, and who ensured that Persia was always one step ahead of its rivals. You run your fingers over one of the letters, carefully tracing the symbols that fill its pages. These are not just ordinary messages. They're instruments of power, coded with information so delicate and dangerous that they could alter the fate of nations. A single intercepted letter could bring down a satrap, unravel an alliance, or start a war. Persia's spies were the invisible hands that guided the Empire's power, moving in the shadows, unseen but always present. The stories of these spies are few and far between, buried under layers of secrecy. But you can imagine the danger they faced, operating under the guise of merchants, diplomats, or even slaves, all while gathering information from the farthest reaches of the Empire. They were everywhere, hidden in plain sight, their true identities known to only a select few. Some of them were caught, of course, their fates sealed by the very secrets they sought to protect. But their legacy, the web of information they wove, lived on in the Empire's political decisions, in the wars that were fought, and in the alliances that were formed behind closed doors. You think of the great spy networks that ran through the Persian Empire, the ones that stretched from the far east of the empire through the mountains of Central Asia to the western borders of the Mediterranean. These spies were the unseen architects of Persia's diplomatic power. They gathered not just information, but leverage. They were the ones who made sure that Persia's enemies never knew when they were being watched. And when the time came, they were the ones who passed the word that would tip the scales in favor of the empire. As you stand there, absorbing the weight of it all, you realize that espionage in the Persian Empire was not just a matter of gathering intelligence. It was a matter of life and death, of keeping the empire's power intact at all costs. The Persian spies, though largely forgotten by history, were the silent backbone of the empire's dominance. Without them, the empire might have fallen, overtaken by rivals who had no idea of the web of secrets that protected Persia. A sudden thought crosses your mind. You can't help but wonder how many other stories of spies have been lost to time, their identities buried beneath the sands of history. How many more clandestine operations were carried out in the shadows, their names and faces erased from the records. Perhaps the true scale of Persia's espionage network was even greater than you can imagine. As you leave the room, you feel the weight of the empire's secrets pressing down on you. The spies may be gone, their whispers faded, but their influence lingers. They were the ones who held the threads of power in their hands, weaving them through the corridors of the empire, ensuring that Persia's legacy endured. The empire's true power, it seems, was not just in its armies or its rulers. It was in the silent network of spies who watched from the shadows, guiding the empire's fate with every quiet whisper. As you walk further into the heart of the palace, you begin to feel a subtle shift in the air, cooler now, almost foreboding, as though something dark lies ahead. The corridors are narrow, the walls lined with intricate carvings that tell stories of power, betrayal, and the countless silent struggles that shaped the Persian Empire. The atmosphere seems to pulse with an energy that is both ancient and dangerous, like a well-guarded secret waiting to be uncovered. You pass through a small wooden door hidden in the shadows and find yourself in a room lit only by the flickering light of a single oil lamp. The room is bare, except for a low table and a few scattered scrolls. Yet it is this very room where some of the Empire's most calculated and lethal actions were born, the art of assassination. In the Persian court, the assassin was not just a murderer. No, they were highly trained individuals, each movement deliberate, each decision made with precision. These assassins were often elite warriors, dispatched by the Empire's inner circle to carry out tasks too delicate or too dangerous for the public eye. Sometimes, these tasks were political, aimed at eliminating rivals to the throne. Other times, they were personal, the result of rivalries or betrayals that ran so deep they could only be settled in blood. You step closer to the table, where a set of ancient scrolls lies open, revealing the methods used by the Empire's most notorious assassins. These weren't just stories of violence, they were carefully orchestrated plans, each move calculated to ensure the victim never saw their end coming. The art of assassination in Persia was about more than just taking a life. It was about sending a message. It was a way of asserting power without ever lifting a sword in public. A single, swift strike in the shadows could eliminate a threat and secure the Empire's future, all without the Empire ever having to acknowledge the deed. As you study the scrolls, your mind wanders to the most famous assassinations in Persian history. Perhaps the most well-known was the assassination of King Artaxerxes I, a death that sent shockwaves through the empire. But even his death, shrouded in mystery and conspiracy, was part of a larger game. A game that had been played for centuries, where the true power of Persia lay not in its kings and queens, but in the hands of those who moved quietly in the background. You think of the royal eunuchs who held considerable influence in the empire, particularly within the harem. These men, though physically castrated, were the trusted confidants of the sultan, and they knew just how to wield their power. The eunuchs often worked with the assassins, offering them the information they needed to carry out their deadly work. The palace was a maze of corridors, hidden rooms, and secret passages, and the eunuchs knew every inch of it. They were the perfect allies for those seeking to eliminate a rival without leaving a trace. You also consider the role of the courtiers, the nobles and military commanders who held the strings of power and often found themselves at odds with one another. Their rivalries, fueled by ambition, led to plots and counterplots, and assassinations became one of the most efficient ways to remove a threat. But as much as assassination was a tool of the powerful, it was also a weapon used by the powerless, those who had nothing to lose and everything to gain by taking a life. The more you think about it, the more you realize that the art of assassination was a deeply ingrained part of Persian politics. It wasn't just about eliminating threats, it was about maintaining control, ensuring that the right people stayed in power, and sending a message to anyone who might dare challenge that power. The Persian Empire, for all its grandeur and glory, was built on the delicate balance of alliances and betrayals, each carefully managed by the unseen hands of those who knew how to use the shadows to their advantage. You pause for a moment, letting the weight of what you've learned settle over you. In many ways, the history of Persia is a history of power, but it is also a history of silence. Silent decisions, silent whispers, and silent actions that shaped the course of the empire. The assassins, hidden in the shadows, were the ultimate players in this quiet game, making and breaking history without ever being seen. The quiet click of a door behind you draws your attention. You turn, startled by the sound, but find nothing. The room is still. It's as though the shadows themselves are watching, waiting for you to leave, knowing that the secrets of the empire have already been revealed. You feel a shiver run down your spine as you turn and walk back toward the door, leaving the room filled with its deadly secrets behind you. As you step into the corridor once more, the faint echo of footsteps seems to follow you, but when you glance behind, no one is there. The palace, with all its intrigue, its power, and its darkness, feels more alive than ever, as though the past is still moving among you, its whispers ever present in the halls. The passage ahead narrows, and the air seems to thicken with an almost imperceptible weight. The ornate carvings on the walls, delicate and intricate, speak of a realm beyond what you've known so far, a hidden world, one that lies beyond the reach of most men. The scent of roses and jasmine fills the air, mixing with the faint, sweet aroma of sandalwood that has lingered in this place for centuries. As you follow the narrow corridor, you feel as though you're stepping into a part of the palace that has been kept away from prying eyes for as long as history itself. You've heard the stories, of course, the stories about the royal harem, filled with beautiful women who lived in luxury and mystery. But the reality is far more complex than any tale you've heard. The harem was not merely a place of pleasure and indulgence. It was a political institution, a crucial pillar of the empire's power. The women who lived here were not just the sultan's consorts. They were mothers, daughters, and political agents, often wielding more power than the men who surrounded them. This was where alliances were made, where the future of the empire was decided with nothing more than a glance, a smile, or a carefully placed word. As you step into the vast chamber, you are struck by the sudden stillness. The air seems to hum with an ancient power, a presence that has been felt here for centuries. The room is adorned with lush velvet tapestries, rich gold thread woven into the fabric, glinting in the dim light. On the floor, plush cushions are scattered, offering comfort to those who would rest and converse. The soft sounds of silk rustling in the breeze create an almost otherworldly atmosphere, as though this room exists outside of time. In the center of the room, a fountain trickles softly, its water glistening in the candlelight. The sound is soothing, almost hypnotic, and you can feel your tension slip away as you sit down on one of the cushions. The harem was not just a place for the sultan's pleasure, it was a center of intrigue, a world in which women exercised influence, built alliances, and maneuvered within the palace's complex politics. You think of the Valid Sultan, the mother of the reigning sultan, whose power extended far beyond the walls of the harem. Her word could shape the destiny of the empire, and no decision was made without her approval. She was not simply the mother of the sultan. She was a force in her own right, a woman who commanded respect, whose influence over the court was unmatched. Her relationship with her son, the sultan, was one of the most important in the entire empire. While the sultan may have sat on the throne, it was often the Valid Sultan who decided the fate of ministers, generals, and even foreign ambassadors. But the Valid was not the only powerful figure in the harem. The concubines, too, held sway in ways that were invisible to those who did not know how to read the subtle cues of court politics. To be chosen as a concubine was to be given a place in history, to become a part of the delicate web of alliances that held the empire together. It was a dangerous game. One wrong move, one slip of the tongue, and a concubine could be cast aside, her influence fading into obscurity. Yet, some women in the harem managed to use their influence not just for personal gain, but for the good of their family, and in some cases for the empire itself. Their strategies were quiet, but effective. They knew when to stay silent, when to speak, and most importantly, when to make the right connections. Through their relationships, they could shape the policies of the empire, just as effectively as any general or vizier. Their power was understated, hidden in plain sight, yet it was just as vital as the power wielded by the men who ruled on the battlefield. You begin to understand the complexity of the harem, a place where the personal and the political intertwined in ways few could comprehend. It was a microcosm of the empire itself, where power was gained and lost, where alliances were built and broken, and where women, though often hidden behind curtains and veils, wielded the true strength that held the empire together. Suddenly, a soft rustle of fabric breaks your reverie. A figure draped in layers of rich silk moves silently past you, her eyes meeting yours for only a moment before she disappears into another chamber. Her presence is fleeting, yet it carries weight. A glance, a look exchanged in the harem could shift the balance of power, change the course of a conversation, or seal a fate. These women were not just passive figures. They were active players in the grand game of the Persian court. As you leave the harem's heart, you are aware of the stillness that clings to the air, the quiet power of the women who shaped the course of the empire from behind closed doors. You step back into the cool corridor, the whispering sound of silk still echoing in your mind. The world of the harem may be hidden from public view, but its influence was felt across Persia, across every city and every decision that shaped the future of this great empire. You can almost hear the soft laughter of the concubines, the quiet counsel of the Valid Sultan, and the strategic whispers that have guided the empire through its many triumphs and struggles. The harem, with all its secrets, remains a reminder that in every great empire, it is often the quietest voices that shape the loudest legacies. The mood in the palace shifts once more, the air feeling thicker as you move through the corridors. It's almost as if the walls themselves are aware of the change that's coming. The bright, golden hues of the tapestries, the soft, luxurious cushions, the flickering candles, all of it seems to lose its warmth. The once immense power of the Persian Empire, its vast expanse stretching across continents, now seems fragile, like a great and ancient tree swaying in the wind, waiting for the storm that will eventually fell it. You pause as you step into a chamber where the light is dimmer, the walls bare, and the furnishings more sparse than what you've seen before. The space feels cold, almost abandoned, and there's a sense of inevitability in the air. The Persian Empire, once a beacon of power, wisdom, and wealth, is now facing the twilight of its reign. The fall of the Persian Empire did not come quickly. No, it was a slow unraveling, the gradual erosion of a once great power, chipped away by both internal strife and external threats. You can almost feel the tension in the air. Whispers of dissent, murmurs of rebellion from within, and the looming presence of an outside force growing ever closer. The grand halls that were once filled with the sounds of revelry, power, and diplomacy are now haunted by silence, the echoes of a time long past. At the heart of it all was the empire's inability to adapt. Persia's once effective system of governance, the carefully crafted web of satraps and royal advisors, could not keep up with the rapid changes in the world around it. The vastness of the empire, once a strength, became its greatest weakness. The communication between the provinces became slower. The coordination between different parts of the empire fractured. In the face of rebellion from within and the rise of a new, powerful force from the west, Persia began to crumble. The Greeks, led by Alexander the Great, arrived like a storm, a force of nature that seemed unstoppable. Persia had been a great empire for centuries. Its leaders believed their kingdom was invincible. But the rise of this young Macedonian king, his ambition fierce and his tactics brilliant, struck like lightning. Alexander's forces, smaller in number but more agile and determined, began their conquest of Persia with swift, relentless force. You can almost hear the thunderous roar of battle, the clash of swords, the shouts of men at war. The Persian Empire, which had once ruled so much of the known world, now found itself fighting for survival. You imagine the Persian generals standing on the battlefield, knowing that the might of their army would not be enough. They had heard the tales of Alexander's success, the way he seemed to capture cities effortlessly, the way his troops pushed forward without hesitation. The Persian soldiers, though brave, were no match for the Greek phalanx, a tightly knit formation of soldiers that advanced with an almost mechanical precision. Persia's empire, which had flourished under the leadership of Darius and Xerxes, now seemed helpless in the face of this young, charismatic conqueror. As you continue through the dim room, you think of the great sultans who once ruled Persia with an iron fist. Their names, Cyrus, Darius, Xerxes, are etched in history, their legacies immortalized in the architecture, the art, and the scriptures of their time. These men, once considered untouchable, were now facing the slow death of their empire. Their power was slipping through their fingers like grains of sand. And as their empire began to fall, so too did the mystique of Persia's invincibility. You pause in front of a large map that covers an entire wall of the room. The map, ancient and faded, shows the vast expanse of the Persian Empire, stretching from the Aegean Sea to the Indus River, from the Caspian Sea to the Arabian Desert. The empire's territories are marked in bold red, a sign of their once pristine dominance. But now parts of the map are filled with the marks of defeat. Territories lost to rebels, cities fallen to foreign invaders, and borders pushed back by the advancing forces of Alexander. The empire's downfall was not just military, however, it was political, cultural, and social. There were whispers of corruption within the royal court, of infighting among the Persian elite. The once strong central authority of the Sultan weakened as ambitious men jostled for power. The satraps, once loyal governors, began to act more like independent rulers, and some even turned against their own king. It was a fragile system, one that had worked for centuries, but now it was cracking under the pressure of its own size and complexity. You can almost hear the sighs of resignation from the Persian courtiers, the realization that the empire's once unshakable foundation was crumbling. The Sultan, once a symbol of divine power, now seems helpless, caught in the web of his own court's intrigues. He is no longer the all-powerful figure he once was, but rather a man surrounded by advisors who can no longer halt the impending collapse. And yet, even as the empire began to fall, there were those who fought to protect it. The Persian generals, the warriors who had fought to expand the empire, now fought to preserve it. But it was clear that the end was near. Persia had reached its peak, and now the world around it was changing. As you leave the room, the somber mood of the palace lingers. The echoes of the past seem to follow you down the hall, whispering of glory and decline, of an empire that once stretched across the known world and now fades into history. But as you move further through the palace, you sense that there is more to the story, more to the fall of the Persian Empire than what meets the eye. There are still secrets buried in these halls. And perhaps, just perhaps, the Empire's true legacy is waiting to be uncovered. As you continue your journey through the shadowed corridors, a soft breeze flows through the passage, almost as if guiding you forward. The heavy, oppressive air of decline lifts slightly, replaced by something different. You sense a quiet reverence that fills the palace, the hum of something ancient and enduring. The walls around you seem to glow with the faintest warmth, the once immense empire fading, but its influence far from extinguished. You find yourself entering a large chamber, its high ceiling supported by grand, arching columns. The room is simple, but beautifully adorned, filled with relics of a time when the Persian Empire was not only a political powerhouse, but also a cultural one. The walls are lined with tapestries, each one telling a story of an era long gone, of kings and queens, of great battles and victories, but also of a people who created art, literature, and philosophy that shaped civilizations for centuries to come. Here, amid the fading grandeur of the palace, you realize that Persia's true legacy isn't just found in its military conquests or its vast empire. It's found in its culture. The Persian Empire, despite its fall, left behind an indelible mark on the world. From the vibrant art of the Safavids to the architecture of the Achaemenids, Persia's influence spread far beyond its borders, shaping the very foundation of Western civilization. You step closer to a series of stone carvings depicting scenes of court life, royal ceremonies, and domestic harmony. The artistry is remarkable. Fine details etched into the stone with incredible precision, the figures frozen in time but full of life. These carvings speak not just of power, but of the lives that were lived in Persia, the beauty that flourished amid the empire's rise and fall. The Persian people were more than just conquerors. They were poets, architects, artists, and scholars. Their culture embraced the beauty of life, the pursuit of knowledge, and the cultivation of art in all its forms. You pause to admire a collection of ancient manuscripts on a low wooden table. They are bound in fine leather, their pages worn with age but still legible. These are the works of Persian poets, philosophers, and scholars, men and women who sought to understand the world through reason, beauty, and art. The works of Ferdowsi, the epic poet who immortalized Persia's past in the Shahnameh, and Rumi, the mystical Sufi poet whose words still resonate across the world, are just a few of the gems that shine through Persian history. The Persian commitment to preserving knowledge, to creating a written history that would survive for centuries is perhaps one of the greatest gifts the empire left to humanity. As you stand there, feeling the weight of the centuries pressing in on you, you realize that the fall of the Persian Empire did not mean the end of its influence. Its culture, its art, and its wisdom continue to shape the world even today. Persian poetry and philosophy had a profound influence on Islamic thought, and Persian art and architecture laid the foundations for much of what we see in the world today. The intricate tile work, the flowing calligraphy, the delicate designs, all of it has lived on, inspiring generations across the world. You walk slowly through the chamber, your eyes taking in the delicate carvings of animals, warriors, and mythical creatures. These are not just images, they are symbols of Persia's view of the world. A world where myth and reality intertwined, where the boundaries between the two were often blurred. You can almost hear the soft voice of a poet reciting verses, the words flowing like a river, carrying with them the weight of an ancient civilization's dreams, hopes, and wisdom. Moving deeper into the room, you spot a large stone sculpture of Ahura Mazda, the supreme god of Zoroastrianism, the religion that was at the heart of Persia's spiritual life. The sculpture stands tall, its eyes serene and wise, a reminder of the empire's deep connection to its spiritual roots. Zoroastrianism, with its teachings of duality, good and evil, light and darkness, was not just a religion, but a way of life for the Persians. It shaped their view of the world and their governance, guiding them to rule with fairness, justice, and wisdom. In the farthest corner of the room, you notice a set of ancient Persian carpets, beautiful, intricate, and vibrant. They tell the story of Persia's rich trade history, where silk, wool, and other textiles were woven into works of art that traveled far beyond Persia's borders. These carpets became coveted treasures, symbols of luxury and prestige. And while the empire itself may have faded into the pages of history, its cultural legacy is woven into these carpets, each one telling the story of a people who valued beauty, art, and the expression of the soul. As you move to the exit, you glance back at the room, taking in the delicate balance of history, culture, and art that the Persian Empire has left behind. The fall of the empire may have ended an era of political dominance, but its cultural influence remains as strong as ever, echoing through the arts, the written word, and the thoughts of those who continue to learn from its wisdom. You walk back into the corridor, the faint sounds of the palace still lingering in the air. The history of Persia, with all its grandeur and complexity, has unfolded before you in layers: politics, power, art, and philosophy, all interwoven in the tapestry of a great empire. As you continue your journey through the palace, you realize that the true legacy of Persia is not just in its victories or its defeats, but in the lasting imprint it left on the world's culture, shaping the very fabric of human civilization for centuries to come. The footsteps behind you, once distant, now grow fainter, as though the empire itself is slowly fading into memory. But the echoes of its cultural legacy, the art, the wisdom, the poetry, remain, guiding those who come after, ensuring that the light of Persia's greatness never truly fades away. As you leave the chamber filled with relics of Persian culture and history, you feel the weight of the empire's vast legacy pressing down on you. The grand halls, now growing quieter, lead you to a place where the power that once ruled over vast territories seems a distant echo. The walls here are darker, less adorned, as if the grandeur of the past is slowly fading away, leaving only the cold stone behind. You enter a long corridor, dimly lit by lanterns hanging from the ceiling. The air here feels heavier, almost oppressive. It's as though the very stones are holding their breath, waiting for the inevitable collapse that is soon to come. In the distance, you can hear the faint sound of footsteps, soft, slow, deliberate, as if someone is watching, waiting. You feel as though the empire is holding on to its final breath, its last moments of power slipping away like sand through your fingers. At the far end of the corridor, you arrive at the Sultan's private chambers, a place where history's most intimate decisions were made, the decisions that would ultimately seal the fate of the Persian Empire. This was the space where the last sultans, kings once considered gods on earth, sat in quiet contemplation, weighing their empire's future with a single word. And yet you sense that something darker, more sinister, has been lurking in these walls. The final betrayals, the quiet whispers that undermine the empire from within, have all taken root here. The last sultan, once revered as a divine ruler, now seems a shadow of his former self. His reign was marked by increasing discontent among the nobility, internal power struggles, and external threats. It is said that in the final years of his rule, he retreated into these private chambers surrounded by his most trusted advisors, not knowing that some of them were playing a game of their own, a game of manipulation and deceit. The very men who were meant to safeguard the Sultan's throne were the ones who pushed him toward his downfall. You move deeper into the chamber, feeling a chill in the air that has nothing to do with the temperature. The room is sparsely furnished, with little more than a low table and several cushions scattered across the floor. A heavy silence hangs over the room, broken only by the occasional flicker of the lanterns. The Sultan's throne, once a symbol of absolute power, sits at the far end of the room, now unoccupied and gathering dust. It's easy to imagine the once great ruler sitting there, making decisions that would affect not just his empire, but the entire course of history. You can almost hear the voices that once filled these walls, whispers of betrayal, discussions of power, secret alliances formed under the Sultan's nose. The once loyal courtiers, generals, and advisors turned on one another, each seeking to carve out their own piece of power as the empire crumbled. The Sultan, isolated and unable to trust anyone, became a prisoner of his own court. Those who had once served him now plotted behind his back, feeding him false information, steering him toward decisions that ultimately weakened his rule. In the end, it was not the armies of a foreign invader that brought down the empire. It was the betrayal from within, the quiet undermining of the very structure that had supported the Sultan's reign. As you step closer to the Sultan's throne, you notice a small, unassuming object lying on the ground beside it, an intricate dagger, its handle adorned with jewels that have long since lost their luster. The blade, once sharp and gleaming, is now dull, its edge worn from years of use. The dagger is a symbol, a reminder of the treacherous acts that were carried out in this very room. It is said that, in the final days of the Sultan's reign, one of his most trusted advisors, desperate for power, used this very dagger to seal the fate of the empire. The betrayal was swift, quiet, and brutal, just like the empire's fall. You feel the weight of the dagger in your hand, the cold metal sending a shiver through your spine. This was not just an instrument of death, it was a symbol of how empires fall, how power corrupts, and how even the mightiest rulers can be undone by the very people they trust. The Persian Empire, once the jewel of the ancient world, was brought to its knees not by foreign invaders or battles fought on distant fields, but by those who sought to grab power from within. As you turn away from the throne, the air seems to thicken, the silence pressing in on you. You leave the chamber, feeling the weight of the Sultan's final days hanging over you. The Persian Empire, for all its grandeur and beauty, ultimately fell because of the very people who had helped build it. The betrayal within these walls, the power struggles that took place in the shadows, were the true cause of its collapse. You walk down the corridors, each step feeling heavier than the last as the realization sets in. The Persian Empire's greatest weakness wasn't its enemies. It was its own inability to adapt, to maintain the trust of its own leaders and subjects. The legacy of the empire lives on, in art, in culture, and in history, but its political downfall serves as a reminder of the fragility of power. Even the mightiest of empires can crumble when trust is broken and ambition takes the place of loyalty. As you step into the fading light of the palace, the history of the Persian Empire feels both distant and immediate, as though the empire is still alive, breathing through its walls, its halls, its secrets. You realize that its story is far from over. Its legacy continues to echo in the whispers of history, a testament to the rise and fall of empires and the fragile nature of power. You step out of the darkened chamber and back into the more open hallways of the palace, but the air still carries that same heavy weight, like the presence of something old, lingering, and unresolved. The walls feel closer now, pressing in as if to keep you within their grasp. The faint sounds of footsteps echo in the distance, but there's something unsettling about them, something that makes your skin crawl. As you walk down the winding corridors, you come to another door, smaller than the others, but adorned with intricate carvings that seem to shimmer faintly in the candlelight. You open it carefully, and as you step inside, you feel a shift in the atmosphere. It's as though the very air has changed. Cooler, almost oppressive, filled with the weight of time. This room, unlike the others you visited, is sparse, void of the luxury that adorned the rest of the palace. Instead, it feels almost haunted, filled with echoes of a past that never fully fades. In the center of the room is a massive marble statue, a figure of a man on horseback, his expression fierce and resolute. It is the statue of Cyrus the Great, the founder of the Achaemenid Empire, one of the most revered rulers in Persian history. His reign marked the beginning of the Persian Empire's rise to power, and his image, often depicted as a godlike figure, embodies the strength and ambition that Persia once had. But here, in this dimly lit room, the statue seems almost like a ghost, a reminder of past conquests and victories long gone. It's hard not to feel the weight of history in this room, the weight of the great kings and generals who once stood proudly on the world stage. You walk closer, studying the figure, its chiseled face, its regal stance. The power that once radiated from Cyrus now feels distant, fading into the past, yet his influence on the Persian Empire is undeniable. Under his rule, Persia expanded into a vast and mighty empire, stretching from the Indus River in the east to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. His military genius and strategic vision allowed him to conquer not only lands but hearts and minds. He wasn't just a ruler. He was a visionary, one whose ideas of governance and empire building were revolutionary for their time. But as you stand before the statue, you feel the presence of something more sinister, the whispers of conquerors past, the ghosts of those who once waged brutal wars, claiming land and power at any cost. Persia, for all its grandeur and wisdom, was built on the blood of others, on the conquests that stretched across continents and cultures. It is said that Cyrus, though wise and just by many accounts, was still a conqueror, one who imposed his will upon the world with a fierce, unyielding hand. And as you think of his empire, you begin to understand that it wasn't just his vision that built Persia, it was the bloodshed that paved the way for that vision to take root. You move away from the statue and glance at the walls, where ancient paintings hang, depicting battles, sieges, and the glory of Persian kings. These images capture the Persian conquests, each one a testament to the empire's military prowess, its ability to overcome enemies on all sides. Yet, as you examine the artwork, you notice something strange. The men in the paintings, once proud and victorious, now seem distant, almost hollow. Their eyes lack the fire they once had, their bodies frozen in time. The victories, the triumphs, now seem empty, like the empire they once built. It's as if the very nature of conquest, once so alive, so vibrant, is now but a shadow of its former self. You can hear the faint echoes of past rulers, their voices now lost to the wind, their ambitions scattered in the sands of time. They were conquerors, men who shaped the world with the power of their armies and the strength of their will. But where are they now? The empire they built has crumbled, their names slowly fading from memory. Even Cyrus the Great, once a godlike figure, now stands as a ghost in this room, a relic of a time long past. As you turn to leave the room, you can't help but wonder about the true cost of empire. The Persian Empire, for all its achievements, was built on conquest, on war, on the subjugation of countless peoples. And yet, the conquerors of Persia, like all conquerors, are eventually forgotten by history. Their names may be immortalized in statues and paintings, but their legacies are tainted by the bloodshed that built them. The room seems to grow colder as you step back into the corridor. You hear the faintest sound, like the rustle of ancient garments in the distance, and a chill runs down your spine. The empire may have fallen, but its ghosts linger in these halls, silent reminders of the cost of conquest. The Persian Empire, with all its grandeur and wisdom, was built on the quiet violence of history, a history that, in the end, devours even the greatest of empires. And as you continue through the palace, the echoes of Persia's past grow fainter, but they never truly fade. The ghosts of its kings, its generals, and its conquerors are always with you, watching from the shadows, waiting for you to remember their names. The legacy of Persia may be gone, but its ghosts will forever haunt the halls of this once great empire. As you walk deeper into the silent, winding corridors of the palace, you feel the weight of history pressing down on you. Each step is heavier than the last, as though the walls themselves are keeping you trapped in this ancient web of power and fate. The flickering light from the lanterns casts long shadows on the stone floors, the shifting darkness playing tricks on your mind. Every corner, every narrow passageway seems to conceal a secret, a whisper from the past. And in the distance, you sense the faint scent of something. Coffee. You pause. The smell is faint but distinct, drawing you forward like a thread pulling you toward the heart of the palace. This, of course, is not just any scent. It's the scent of coffee, a drink that would go on to conquer the world, but its origins are far older than most realize. Persia, long before the drink would reach the bustling cafes of Europe, was one of the first places where coffee was truly cherished, not just as a drink, but as a symbol of conversation, diplomacy, and power. You find yourself entering a large, grand chamber, the walls lined with intricate mosaics of ancient Persian scenes, battles, celebrations, and royal feasts. But in the center of the room stands a small table, set with delicate porcelain cups and an ornate coffee pot. You can almost hear the clink of porcelain and the soft murmur of courtly conversation, the sound of rulers and courtiers sipping coffee as they discuss the fate of their empire. This room, so elegant and refined, is where the sultans and their closest advisors once gathered to share not just a drink, but their plans for the future. Coffee, in this time, wasn't just a drink, it was a ritual. It was brewed in intricate pots, served in delicate cups, and consumed during the most important moments of court life. But what truly makes coffee so significant is not just its caffeine, but what it represented in Persia's court, the perfect setting for diplomacy. The coffee ceremony, a tradition that would later spread throughout the Middle East and Europe, became a vital part of how decisions were made. It was said that the most important conversations took place over a cup of coffee, where rulers and generals would speak freely, sharing their thoughts without fear of repercussion. You can almost picture the scene, a sultan, weary from the stresses of ruling, sitting with his closest ministers, sipping his coffee as they discuss the empire's future. The rich, dark liquid would have been poured carefully into ornate cups, and the conversation would flow as freely as the coffee itself. But these were not just casual conversations. These were the discussions that would shape the empire's fate. How many decisions, how many alliances and betrayals were sealed with a simple sip of coffee? But coffee wasn't just about power. It was also about culture. Persian coffee houses, known as kahvehane, were far more than places to drink. They were gathering spots where poets, philosophers, and artists would congregate, exchanging ideas and debating the issues of the day. Coffee houses became the birthplace of Persian intellectual thought, a space where ideas could be shared freely and where the sharpest minds of the empire could challenge one another. In these humble establishments, the fate of nations was often discussed, and ideas that would shape the future of the empire were born. The quiet moments shared over a cup of coffee were as much a part of the empire's legacy as any battle fought or decree issued from the throne. As you stand in the room, your fingers brushing against the delicate porcelain cup in front of you, you think of how the simple drink spread across continents and cultures. The Persians were among the first to embrace it, and from their courts it traveled to the Ottoman Empire, then to Europe, and eventually to the rest of the world. Coffee became more than just a drink. It became a cultural symbol of connection, a drink shared between friends, rivals, and strangers alike. It's no wonder that in the rise and fall of great empires, coffee remained a constant, a beverage that transcended politics and wars, one that brought people together in moments of both triumph and defeat. You can almost hear the voices of Persian poets, sipping their coffee as they wrote verses about love, longing, and loss, their pens dancing across the page with the same rhythm as the quiet stir of the coffee in their cups. The Persian Empire may have fallen, but its legacy in the world of coffee, its quiet diplomacy, its artistry in brewing, and its cultural significance continues to echo in every coffee house today. The faint sound of the kahvehane in the distance seems to call to you, a whisper from the past. You walk slowly to the door, taking one last glance at the table. The coffee, though cold now, is still a symbol of something greater, a time when power and culture intertwined, when the simple act of drinking coffee could change the course of history. As you step into the corridor, the room behind you seems to vanish into the ether, leaving only the faint memory of its fragrance in the air, a symbol of Persia's enduring legacy. As the palace begins to grow quieter, you realize that this journey, like the empire itself, is drawing to a close. The lights are dimming, the footsteps fading into silence. Yet the stories of this great empire, the lessons learned from its rise and fall, will live on through coffee, through culture, and through the quiet whispers of history. As you continue your walk through the palace's winding corridors, the air around you seems to grow thick with the weight of centuries, as though every step you take is reverberating through time. The grand halls are now behind you, replaced by smaller, more intimate chambers, rooms where it feels the quiet power of the empire once thrived. There's a sense of reflection here, a feeling that the quiet wisdom of the Persian Empire still lingers in these walls, just beyond reach. You step into a modest library, its shelves lined with ancient scrolls, manuscripts, and books. The room is dimly lit by oil lamps, their soft glow casting flickering shadows on the walls. In a corner, a stone statue of Zoroaster, the founder of Zoroastrianism, stands tall, his features serene, wise, and deeply contemplative. His gaze, though carved in stone, seems to follow you as you move, a reminder of Persia's deep philosophical and spiritual roots. The Persian mind was one of the empire's greatest treasures. Persia, despite its conquest and decline, produced some of the greatest thinkers, poets, and philosophers of its time. The intellectual legacy of the Persian Empire remains one of the most influential in history. You can almost feel the echoes of these great minds, the philosophers who pondered existence, the scientists who studied the stars, and the poets who wove words into timeless works of art. As you walk past the shelves, you catch sight of an open scroll on the table before you. The script is flowing, delicate, written in an elegant calligraphy that mirrors the beauty of Persian art itself. It's the Shahnameh, the epic poem written by Ferdowsi, chronicling the history of Persia from its mythical beginnings to the fall of the Sassanid Empire. This epic work not only tells the story of Persia, but also of its soul. It's a work that transcends time, a reminder of the pride, honor, and tragedy that have defined the Persian people for millennia. The poetry of Hafez and Rumi, two of Persia's most revered poets, also lives within these walls. Their words, filled with mysticism and philosophy, have echoed throughout time, their verses carrying a sense of universal truth and beauty that has influenced cultures from Persia to the far reaches of the West. Their work transcends mere poetry. It is a language of the soul, a deep meditation on love, spirituality, and the nature of existence itself. As you read their words, you can almost hear their voices, soft and soothing, like a gentle breeze across the pages of history. In another corner of the library, you find Avicenna's Canon of Medicine, one of the most influential texts in the history of science. Avicenna, a Persian physician, philosopher, and polymath, shaped the future of both medicine and philosophy. His work in the philosophy of mind, the study of logic, and the treatment of disease was revolutionary. You can almost feel the weight of his intellect, the quiet power of his ideas that continue to shape the world to this very day. As you walk deeper into the library, you realize that the Persian Empire's greatest legacy was not its vast conquests or monumental architecture, it was its intellectual inheritance. The Persians not only conquered lands, they also conquered knowledge, understanding, and the very essence of what it means to think deeply about the world and humanity's place within it. The empire's rulers, generals, and philosophers did not merely build an empire of stone. They built one of the mind, of ideas, of theories that would survive far beyond the walls of any palace. You pause for a moment, contemplating the profound nature of Persian thought. The Persian Empire, despite its eventual downfall, laid the groundwork for much of the knowledge and ideas that shaped the future. The influence of Persian scholars, poets, and philosophers spread across the Islamic world and even to the West, influencing thinkers like Thomas Aquinas and Maimonides. Their wisdom and intellect were passed on like a secret flame across generations, lighting the way for those who came after. You gaze at the shelves once more, each book, each scroll, and each manuscript standing as a testament to the minds that once lived in this very space. These ideas, once fresh and radical, have become the foundation of much of the world's intellectual pursuits. Persia's greatest gift to humanity was not its conquest of lands or its riches. It was its gift of thought, of philosophy, of poetry, and of science. As you prepare to leave the room, the thought lingers in your mind. The Persian Empire may have fallen, but its intellectual legacy will never fade. It will live on in the ideas that continue to shape our world. The empire's greatest strength was not its power over territories, but its power over thought, and its ability to inspire the minds of the future. You step back into the corridor, the quiet echo of wisdom and knowledge following you. The Persian Empire may be a shadow of its former self, but its influence, its legacy, and its brilliance will remain forever etched in the minds of those who continue to seek knowledge. The last light of Persia may have dimmed, but its flame burns brightly in the hearts of those who have inherited its wisdom. As you make your way through the final corridors of the palace, the atmosphere grows even heavier, as if the very walls are closing in, urging you to leave the secrets of the past behind. The echoes of time seem to reverberate here, each step you take drawing you deeper into the heart of the empire's twilight. The light grows dimmer, and with it the air thickens, like a long-forgotten memory resurfacing after centuries of silence. The last chambers you enter are almost devoid of decoration, the walls bare except for faint, faded murals that seem to whisper of forgotten stories. The absence of opulence is jarring. This is not the grand room where emperors held court or generals commanded armies. No, this is the space where decisions of fate were sealed in hushed voices, in the flickering candlelight, and where the most dangerous games of power were played. Here, history was made, not with the clash of swords, but with the quiet murmur of voices and the slow, deliberate steps of men and women who knew how to bend the empire to their will. As you move further into the room, your gaze falls upon a large wooden table covered with ancient scrolls, maps, and letters. This was the place where the Sultan's most trusted ministers gathered, not to engage in open discourse, but to weave the intricate web of intrigue that held the empire together. Here, alliances were made, betrayals were plotted, and the future of Persia was determined in whispered conversations. This was not the open public court. This was where the empire's true decisions were made, far away from the eyes of the public and the courtly spectators. You walk up to the table and examine one of the scrolls, carefully unrolling it. The script is neat, deliberate, and filled with the kinds of instructions that would change the course of history. There are messages encoded in the writing, codes that only the highest-ranking officials could understand, instructions that would send men and women on secret missions to far-flung parts of the empire, or perhaps into the hands of foreign diplomats. These were not just letters. They were blueprints for power, carefully designed to maintain control over a vast, sprawling empire. The whispers of the palace seem to take on a life of their own here. You imagine the men who sat at this table, their faces shadowed in candlelight, their eyes sharp with the awareness that their every word could tip the balance of power. There were no simple discussions here. Every conversation, every decision was a step toward securing the empire's survival, or its ultimate collapse. But it wasn't just the politics of court life that filled this room. The empire's internal fractures were at the heart of many of these discussions. The Persian Empire, once unified, had begun to splinter. Rival factions within the royal family, greedy viziers, and ambitious generals all jockeyed for control, each pulling in different directions. The Sultan, once a godlike figure, found his power slipping through his fingers, the empire's once unshakable foundation beginning to crumble. The struggle for power wasn't fought on battlefields, but in these very rooms, in silent conspiracies, in coded letters, and in the manipulation of allegiances. As you trace the words on the scroll, you can almost hear the soft mutterings of the court officials who penned them. Were they loyal to the Sultan, or were they working their own angles, using the empire's struggles to further their personal ambitions? The line between loyalty and betrayal was never clear in these halls. The same ministers who swore allegiance to the Sultan may have been plotting against him in the next breath. The same generals who led the empire's armies could be conspiring with foreign invaders, striking deals that would bring about Persia's downfall. You pause for a moment, letting the gravity of it all sink in. The empire was not just brought down by external invaders, it was destroyed from within. It was the slow erosion of trust, the rise of personal ambition, and the quiet betrayal of those in power that led to the empire's ultimate collapse. The Sultan's court, once a place of grandiosity, had become a breeding ground for deceit, manipulation, and subterfuge. The faint sound of footsteps echoes in the distance, reminding you that the empire's story is still unfolding in these halls. The Persian Empire may have fallen, but the whispers of its rulers, generals, and ministers continue to echo through time. The power they once wielded, the decisions they made in the shadows of these chambers, still reverberate in the world today. As you turn to leave, the air around you grows colder, and you can almost hear the faint murmur of voices behind you, as if the palace is still alive with the memories of its past. The empire is gone, but its secrets remain, hidden in the shadows, waiting for someone to uncover them, to understand the complexities of power, betrayal, and ambition that once shaped the fate of the Persian Empire. You step into the corridor once more, your footsteps falling softly on the cold stone floor. The palace seems to stretch endlessly ahead of you, each corner hiding its own mystery, its own story. The Persian Empire may be gone, but its legacy, its influence, and its secrets continue to echo in these halls, whispering to those who are willing to listen. And as you walk further into the heart of the palace, you can't help but feel that the story of Persia is far from over. It lives on in the very air around you, in the silence that follows each whispered secret, in the power that still lingers long after the empire has fallen.